Hello, I'm Kyle,
And I'm Ruth.
and today we're going to talk about sentences.
Okay, so we're going to start by looking at some examples of possible sentences. So let's run through them and check which of these are correct. Number 1, I am an English language teacher. How does that look, Kyle?
That looks good.
Okay. Number 2, the smallest cake in the box. What about that?
I don't think so.
Number 3, I spent the day at the pool.
Yeah, that one sounds good.
Number 4, for the whole afternoon.
No, that sounds weird.
No. Okay, brilliant. So maybe that was clear to you that some of those sounded wrong. Maybe it wasn't. Or maybe you could hear that something sounded weird, but you couldn't quite explain what it was that's wrong. So we want to try and explain to you in a bit more detail about exactly what it is that makes sentences correct and makes them not correct.
So what does a sentence need? A sentence needs at least one independent clause. And an independent clause needs to have a subject and a predicate. So what's a subject? A subject is the person or the thing that is being talked about in the independent clause. And what's a predicate? It's the information about the subject, which is also using a verb.
Okay, brilliant. So a predicate, which is required in a sentence, is a little bit different than just a verb. And I want to explain how in this slide. So let's have a look at an example then of a sentence which just includes a subject and a verb. John smells. Okay, and we've got here, as we said, a subject and a verb. And it kind of functions, kind of okay, but we're left with questions. It's not really clear what this sentence means. Actually, it needs a little bit more. For example, John smells really good. John smells the flowers. John smells like he needs a shower. Okay, so sometimes a verb is not really enough to put across the meaning required in a sentence, and we need to add a little bit more. And that's why we say predicate rather than verb.
So let's look at some examples. We're going to come back to the examples that we talked about earlier. The first sentence says, I am an English language teacher. And we see that that has both a subject and a predicate. So that sentence is correct. Then we look at number 2, the smallest cake in the box. We have a subject, but there's no predicate. So how do we make this sentence correct? We need to add the predicate. So the smallest cake in the box is for Tom. The predicate being is for Tom. The third sentence we have is Sally spent the day at the pool. In this sentence, we have Sally as the subject, and the predicate is spent the day at the pool. So we know that it's correct. The last sentence is for the whole afternoon. In this sentence, we don't have a subject or a predicate. So in order for it to be correct, we have to add a subject and a predicate. So how do we do that? The sentence is now, for the whole afternoon, Francisco played tennis. So now we have our subject, Francisco, and our predicate, played tennis.
Okay, so now that we've talked about the basics of what's needed to make an independent clause, let's talk about some of the examples of kinds of sentences we can use. So we'll start with the basic, which would be a simple sentence. This one contains only one independent clause that we've already explained. So examples here, Jess plays the guitar. We've got the subject and the verb predicate, and nothing else. Just that independent clause. Also, I love to eat cake. We've got the subject, I love to eat cake, is our verb predicate. Simple. This next example shows us that simple sentences aren't always really short like this. We can make them a little longer, as in this example here. We spent a week trying to make sentence construction look interesting in a presentation. So in here you can see we've crammed a bit more information into a simple sentence. But I would argue it sounds a bit kind of stuffed in. Perhaps in this example it would have been better to use a different form of sentence structure, something a little more developed.
So a form of sentences that is a little more advanced and a little more developed are called complex sentences. Complex sentences are more advanced than simple sentences because even though they have one independent clause, they also have one or more dependent clauses. We're going to take a look at two sentences so that we can see where's the one independent clause and where's the one or more dependent clause. The first sentence, I didn't like the movie, even though it had a high budget. We see that the first part of the sentence is the independent clause, I didn't like the movie. And the second part of the sentence, even though it had a high budget, is the dependent clause. The next sentence, because he felt sleepy, George decided to take a walk around the block. This sentence is the opposite of the first sentence, because in this sentence, the dependent clause comes first and the independent clause comes second. So sentences can still be more complicated. They can still be more complex, and we're going to look at how we can continue to advance in our sentence structure.
Okay, great. So taking it one step further, we've got a compound sentence. Right, so a compound sentence would actually join together two or more independent clauses. So those are two clauses which could function alone if we wanted them to, perhaps as simple sentences, but we are joining them together to create a more developed sentence. I just want to note that these two independent clauses, they have to share some kind of topic. They have to relate to one another in some kind of way. Otherwise it would sound strange when we put them together. Okay, so let's look at the ways in which we can join independent clauses, because there are three ways in which we do this. The first option would be to link the two clauses together with a coordinated conjunction and a comma, as in the first example here. Louise loves her job, comma, but some days she misses being a student. Okay, so we've got the comma here and the coordinating conjunction. If you're not familiar with what one of those is, here's a list of all of the coordinating conjunctions we have available in the English language. You can remember these with the acronym fanboys, if you like. Okay, so the second way to join two independent clauses is with a semicolon, just a semicolon. As in the example here, we spent a week making a presentation, semicolon, we wanted to make sentence construction seem interesting. I want to note you must never join two independent clauses in this manner with just a comma. This is called comma splicing, and it is a really common mistake that people make when they're trying to form compound sentences. So be very careful in your writing to check that if it's an independent clause, if it could possibly exist by itself, we need to have a semicolon joining it with another independent clause. Another example of the way we can join them together would be with a semicolon and a conjunctive adverb. As in the third example here, when we've got Jeremy kept talking in class, semicolon, and then the conjunctive adverb, therefore he got in trouble. In this example, the conjunctive adverb, it links the two independent clauses together in a way. It makes it clear why it is that we put them together and somehow joins them. Okay, therefore he got into trouble. This is the reason that he got into trouble. Okay, fantastic.
To take our sentences and make them a little bit more complex and a little bit more difficult as well, we're going to work on complex compound sentences. Complex compound sentences combine a complex sentence with one or more simple sentences or one or more complex sentences. So we're going to take a look at two examples of how we can do this. The first example is grammar can be boring, semicolon. We spent a week making a presentation, comma, because we wanted to make sentence construction seem interesting. The second sentence, although it was raining, comma, Marie went to the park, semicolon. She bought an umbrella so she didn't get wet. In these two sentences, we can see that we use one sentence and then we combine it with either a simple sentence or a complex sentence again.
Okay then, so before we wrap things up, we want to give you a couple of tips to take away, to use for a bit of advice while you're creating your sentences in your work. Okay, so firstly, vary your sentence structure. Don't purely write simple sentences, don't only write in complex ones, but try to mix it up. Try to vary so that it makes your writing sound more natural, more fluent, and more interesting. Secondly, no more than 2 or 3, maybe 4 clauses. Just because you can, keep on adding dependent clauses onto your sentence. Just because grammatically it's acceptable doesn't mean it's a good thing to do. Doesn't mean it's okay. It is best to limit. You don't want a sentence that runs on through a whole paragraph because your reader's going to get bored. Okay? Finally, one last piece of advice is to read more. Okay? We believe the best way to learn how to write well is to read how other people have done it. Okay? The more you read, the better your writing is going to get. The more you expose yourself to expert writing, the more you're going to improve in your own language. Okay? Just a couple of things to take away.
I hope you feel more confident in making sentences. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye.